been Porgman, Manny's dad. It's been about 45 days since my youngest son killed himself. I was a freshman at the University of Colorado Boulder. Um, One of the earlier videos that I made within days of putting him in the ground, um, I lashed out at the university pretty hard, and there's a lot of frustration and anger there. Um, and some time has passed. I'm not less angry or frustrated, but I do know more. So I thought it was time for an update on that video. And a good question I get often, for those of you who have filled out the Manny band form and joined the band, one of the number one question is, so did you get a meeting with the chancellor? Did you go to Boulder? And so I want to let you know that I did. Manny's brothers and I, a few days after, I guess it was about a week after the funeral, went to Boulder, and we met with Chancellor Justin Schwartz and Dr. Deandra Mull, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs. And I want to say I felt very listened to. It was a good meeting, and I'm grateful for it. I want to share with you what I brought to the meeting. I want to share with you what I learned at the meeting and a couple of things I've learned since the meeting. So for summary, here's what we went in there with. One, I reiterated, like, don't blame the victim. We can't expect the suicidal victim to all of a sudden self-advocate. We wouldn't expect a murderer to all of a sudden call the police on himself. So if we're going to protect the suicide victim from the murderer, we have to bake in guardrails and safety nets around that person through the community and the network and the infrastructure of the university. How do we do that? One thing, we need to train everyone on suicide prevention. Every student, every faculty member, every employee, every parent, every food service worker, some at different levels, right? Your RA is going to have a higher level of training than the next person, and a certain faculty member will have, right? But some level of training. And we can do this. Everybody who's ever started a job at a company, you go through training. You go through an onboarding process, and the students do as well. This has to be part of it. Also, engineering safety nets into the operations. So building the way we do grades and the way we work and like how we go through university life. This has to be baked in. Freshman professors having some reasonable flexibility and second chances baked into their grading policies. Freshmen having the ability to have a Manny card to maybe override that situation they think is just so horrible to them, if they knew they had the ability to have a second chance in those early first days. And every piece of the bureaucracy, knowing that when there's great tension or you're talking to someone on the other side of the phone or the portal or in the office and they're distraught and they're distressed because of your bureaucratic answer, that there's a resource. Maybe you can't change your answer, but you can send that person to get some help or let the system know that that person needs some help. We need to build, number 4, build mental health services and counseling services into the system. Not just have them in a room locked up on the 3rd floor where no one knows where it is, waiting for the murderer to walk in and ask for help. No, what if all freshmen had a therapist baked into their schedule? What if there was, for first semester freshmen, there was not an optional, it's in the schedule. You're a freshman first semester, for 45 minutes or one period a week, you have your mental health check-in. It's there in the system. What if, as part of your onboarding and registration process, before you can register for classes, you have to take the mental health screening AI tool? Some doctor friends of mine tell me there's actually some really good tools out there. That if you come into the emergency room with a broken arm, part of the process, part of the triage and the intake are where you do a little preliminary screening, and supposedly they're really good. Well, what if you had to go through that before you could register for class? And then what if we give it to you again right around finals, halfway through the semester, right before Thanksgiving, when things get tense, when we know students are stressing out? Not optional, not locked up in a building, but part of the sequence of the semester. Number 5, this one's tough, and I acknowledge this is tough, but using technology to track suicidal behavior through Wi-Fi networks and computer systems. Now, once you say surveillance, people get a little freaked out, but you know what? We've all given that up. Every single one of us knows that somebody's watching what we're doing at work. Everyone on campus knows that somebody's watching what you do on the university network. There's certain things that are not for work. Suicide needs to be something that triggers something on a university network. And yeah, it's complicated. But you got really smart. There's a whole law school there to talk about privacy issues. There's a whole engineering and computer science department. Put those two people together, figure it out. All right, that was basically what I went there with specifically. Here's what I learned at the meeting. There actually are a lot of resources on campus. That whole thing in my previous video where I talked about, there needs to be someone who run down the hall and catch a student. If we can have kids run down the hall, run down the field and catch a football, there should be someone to run down the hall and catch a student. There is actually a mental health command center that can send out counselors or the police to do well checks on students that someone's concerned about. That system is there. I don't think a lot of people know how to use it. I don't think people know where it is, how to access it. But that's infrastructure, that's engineering, that's structure, that's process. There's a lot of work to be done at CU in that regard. But the basics of the system are there, and that needs to be acknowledged. And as far as I can tell, there are really, really good people there who want to make a difference and are working really, really, really hard. This one was difficult to hear. A lot of my frustration in that video, when I spoke to the students there at the memorial, a lot of that frustration came from the perception that, the university had all these puzzle pieces. They knew all of these things about Manny. Why didn't they put them together? And that is still a great frustration. And I'm not going to let up on that question, but now I understand the answer, or at least why it has been. There is no single customer or client resource management tool in place at the University of Colorado in Boulder. There's no they. I'm a commercial real estate broker. I use Salesforce. There's a tool for my industry. I can track properties, buyers, sellers. I can search by map. I can go back throughout my entire career and connect the dots. The dots, even if they're there at the University of Colorado in Boulder, they can't be connected because the health center has its computer system and the registrar has its computer system and the disability services office has their computer system, and together they do not talk. So even if there was a professor who was concerned about Manny and wanted to know a little bit more about him, where is he from, what's his background, he's got nowhere to go. There's no place for even forget AI, there's no place for the concerned human being to go pull this information together. And when you drop your kid off, like when you write a check to one school and you buy a sweatshirt that has one name across it, and when you drop your student off at one place, you kind of think that it's one thing. It's not. And that has to change. And I will acknowledge Chancellor Schwartz understands that, and he was ahead of me on that issue. He was working on it right now. Here's a couple of things I learned since my meeting. Colorado is a top 10 state. not in football, but for suicide. According to CDC, it's one of the top 10 most dangerous suicidal states in the country. I don't get it. I don't understand why. It's so freaking gorgeous, but there's something in the water out there. And secondly, CU Boulder is not a JED campus. What is JED? The JED Foundation is an organization that provides a service called JED Campus. And their sole mission is to help colleges and universities build mental health and suicide prevention systems and processes so that every university doesn't reinvent the wheel. You can go to their website, use the drop down menus, search your state, search if your school is there. And CU Boulder's not there. I'm not saying that they're the only ones. Maybe there are other great resources out there. It's just something I learned. In conclusion, I think it's important to acknowledge, and I want you to know, I found Chancellor Schwartz to be sincerely concerned and eager to listen. I believe he is a good guy. He is a father. He is also an engineer. He believes that many of the answers can be found through technology and baking safety nets into the system. I believe that he is committed to making change. And it's important to recognize he has only been on the job for a few days more than Manny was at school. He is brand new to the job, and he needs time to wrap his arms around it and figure out how this place works before he turns it upside down. So I want to thank him and his colleagues for their time. I want to assure them that I am committed to being a partner and helping any way I can. And I look forward to the work that you're going to do and that we'll do together. And I encourage you to take the bold steps. Some of these things will be difficult. Change is always difficult. But yes, be bolder.